Welcome to Carbon 13's podcast, Climate Takes, where we ask our guests, founders and investor community to give their takes on their industry and their climate challenge, and also a call to action to ask what is climate going to take in order to solve the climate emergency. Today I'm joined by Lewis Jenkins, CEO of Nium, green ammonia company. So welcome to Climate Takes Ammonia.
The secret of change is not on fighting the old, but building the new. Ammonia is the smelly, ugly sister of the beautiful hydrogen hype train. We need to make tons and then hundreds of tons of the catalyst, and that's what our latest facility with £1 million grant from the UK government lets us do. And that means hard science, hard tech. It does mean significant investment up front, but it also means huge payoffs if you can actually demonstrate real emissions reduction. A kid said to me, "Look, mate, we don't really need you to make us feel better about climate change. You need to go out and do something about it." And I was like, oh, shit.
Lewis, welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Very happy to be here.
Lovely. First off, big question. If we're serious about climate, why would we be serious about ammonia?
Oh, a couple of reasons. For a start, ammonia production is already the most polluting chemical industrial process on our planet. It consumes roughly 1% of total global energy with 2% of total global emissions. It is also of interest because it can burn as a clean fuel. It burns with no CO2. And it's also quite a good hydrogen energy vector. So it's got around treble the energy density of even compressed hydrogen. But it's much cheaper and easier to store and transport around. But the main thing is that it's basically responsible for half of global food and 2% of global emissions.
Because I think a lot of people will have heard about hydrogen is vital to the climate emergency, but I don't think ammonia gets nearly the same amount of airtime.
No, ammonia is the smelly, ugly sister of the beautiful hydrogen hype train. I mean, ammonia is NH3, nitrogen and hydrogen. And it is a way of storing and transporting hydrogen. And it's a more energy dense way of doing so. So ammonia is interesting for on the N side is what doubles your farmer's yields. The nitrogen, fixed nitrogen, is what doubles a farmer's yields. And the H side is the energy side. It carries hydrogen, energy as hydrogen. So yes, they are related. You make ammonia from hydrogen. A massive proportion of the hydrogen we make today goes into making ammonia. The trouble with that is that it's grey hydrogen. It's the dirty kind from fossil fuels. From air, essentially, using fossil fuels and an iron-based catalyst, which he invented. And then Bosch, from the family Bosch, from the tools and the ones who invented the spark plug, more or less, as well. He took Haber's invention and helped to scale it up to industrial scale. So it's known as the Haber-Bosch process, the ammonia production process. And that puts half the food on our plate, and it also puts half the nitrogen in our bodies.
So by creating the Haber-Bosch process, we've been able to stop some wars and feed half the world. What's wrong with it?
Right, it's crazy. The world of ammonia is a wild and interesting one, but essentially, so Haber won the Nobel Prize for inventing ammonia, and that then went out to massive facilities which make ammonia at scale, and then was able to deal with what was then a real crisis around food in the world. It's also the detonator to the 20th century population explosion. So it's probably the reason why half of us are here. So it's impossible to underestimate, really, the importance of ammonia. It's more important than almost all inventions that man has done. This ability to feed more people on less land, essentially, was critical to us being able to grow the population, doubling the population in the 20th century. Of course, the trouble is it all built on fossil fuels. And that's, been a challenge to us. At the beginning, it was fine and it didn't matter. And ammonia is also used in lots of other contexts as well. It's used as a chemical. It's used to prepare clothes, the materials for clothing. It's used as a cleaner. It's used for plastic treatments as well. So it's become one of the, Vaclav Smil calls it one of the four pillars um, of modern society. But yes, the trouble is that most of it is quite dirty, the most polluting chemical industrial process on our planet.
Exactly. And therefore, Nium, how
Mm-hmm.
is Nium solving this problem?
Good question. So, as I mentioned, ammonia synthesis is built around a catalyst, and that catalyst operates at very high pressures and high temperatures. Back in 2019, my co-founder, Dr. Yubiao Niu, he's a nanophysicist and a chemical engineer, was working at the UK synchrotron facility, Diamond Light Source, when he read a paper from Stanford University that predicted that in the future we'd be able to have a new type of catalyst, a nanocatalyst. So nano from the Greek, small, and a nanometer, for context, to a meter is like a marble to planet Earth. So not just small, bloody small. And so this paper predicted that with advances in microscopy and advances in our ability to start assembling what are called nanoclusters, we might be able to then increase the surface area of the catalyst, which would then make more of the active surface available to the nitrogen and hydrogen gas that's passed over the catalyst. And that would then allow you to drop the heat and drop the pressure. So basically, with more active surface, you need less energy. And so that was an interesting theory, but it was a theory from Stanford. What my co-founder was able to do was put that theory into practice, to start assembling the tiny nanoclusters using a massive metal octopus-looking machine called the Matrix Assembly Cluster Source, and he used that. It took him 3 years, but he was able to start making them. And that's when I met him on Carbon 13, when he'd got his very early stage prototype, the first proofs. We were at TRL3 back then, and we've since basically built bigger models and prototypes of the thing that works. I'm very pleased to say that now we have a facility running, making the most efficient, cleanest ammonia in the world. It's very small scale, but we're very excited about it because it shows that there's a new way to make ammonia, a decarbonized, decentralized, democratized way of making ammonia without a fossil fuel in sight.
That's incredible. What TRL level would you be at now?
So we're at TRL5 with the ammonia synthesis itself. And we've got a pilot planned early next year, which takes us to TRL6 and then on to 7. And we are at TRL6 with the industrial scale-up technology. And that's important because it's all very well doing this stuff in the lab, but we need to make tons and then hundreds of tons of the catalyst. And that's what our latest facility with £1 million grant from the UK government lets us do, or at least up to 100 kilograms a day. So we can fulfill the pilots with that. So we have one patent filed on the actual technology, the nanoclusters, the nanocatalyst, and then the other is filed on the ability to scale that technology up. So to make more and more of those nanoclusters to then start replacing the fossil fuel hungry industrial incumbents.
And for our listeners, TRL, by the way, is technology readiness level. Goes up
Indeed,
to about
it was a
9.
scale that NASA worked out, which helped to understand when you're looking at hard tech. It's a kind of shorthand for understanding where you're at with the hard tech. And the short version is that TRL1 is like an idea, and TRL9 is like it's out in the world, it's commonplace, and you see it everywhere in society. It's working. And that's handy for us because it's a scale of progress where you need to get to. And so we've demonstrated our technology now in our 7,500 square foot facility at our home, the nanosphere as we call it. That's TRL5, but we're looking to take that onto TRL6, and that's demonstrated in a relevant environment. So on an industrial site, for us would be out in the world with real world hydrogen. The good thing about what we've done is because we've got a big site at just outside Oxford, our nanosphere, we've installed electrolyzers ourselves and installed a nitrogen compressor as well. So we're taking the nitrogen from air on site and we're using electrolyzers just as we would at one of our partner sites as well. So Yeah, exciting. And TRL is a good kind of shorthand for helping us gauge and manage our progress.
I would say it's going to be one of the first questions an investor asks a founder, or a founder needs to figure out what is your TRL level. It just, as you say, it sets the stage about where is this company at.
Right.
I want to zoom out a bit and actually talk about the industry of ammonia. It's worth hundreds of billions globally. You have, you're at your stage TRL level 5, 6, and you've already got $120 million pipeline.
Yes.
Who's buying? Who are these? Who's buying? Who's excited? Who's so excited to get their hands on your green ammonia that you've already got $120 million pipeline?
Yes, good question. The short answer is actually back to the question you first asked, which is, so people talk a lot when we were first chatting, it was people talk about hydrogen, but then ammonia doesn't really get a mention as much. And I think the realization slowly dawning in the hydrogen economy is that it's a bit more for practical use cases like the ammonia economy. So we're going to use hydrogen to power automotive. If you go back 10 years, 5 years, we were going to use hydrogen for lots of different applications. We were going to use it for fuel cells in vehicles. We're going to use it for lots of, for maybe heating homes as well, it was talked about. And there were lots of these kind of use cases in automotive and mobility. And then people started dealing with hydrogen. And hydrogen is quite difficult to deal with from a practical level.
Why? As in, because it's
Why?
difficult to
Because
transport?
hydrogen requires cryogenic temperatures or incredibly high pressures. So the cryogenic temperatures, for context, minus 253 degrees centigrade. That's colder than anywhere in our solar system. And the pressures up to 700 bar pressure, that's only found at the very bottom of our oceans. And all of that costs money. So hydrogen is great if you want to use it straight out of the gates, but if you then need to hang on to it in any way, shape or form, it becomes dangerous. It embrittles pipes. It tends to leak a lot as well. And unlike ammonia, you can't smell it. You don't know what's happening. And so it all becomes a bit tricky in the real world application. So we've deployed a lot of capital into hydrogen. There's a lot of renewable energy that's been turned into hydrogen. And then it's, okay, what's the use case for that hydrogen? And we argue at Nium that the hydrogen economy is a bit more like the ammonia economy. And in that world, what we should do, the best use for the hydrogen we've got that's clean, is to replace the grey stuff that we're already using. So that goes into ammonia. And we enable at small scale, with flexibility and the ability to scale up fast, that transition. The Haber-Bosch process traditionally doesn't allow for that because you need a lot of energy, so much energy that renewables can't. It doesn't make sense to do it for renewables. Because our nanocatalyst requires less energy, we enable kind of renewable energy to enter the fray when it comes to ammonia production, which didn't really exist before. So you can electrify Haber-Bosch, but it's energy intensive. We think about it in terms of to back to your original question, what is our market? We've seen our inbound. We didn't believe this at the beginning. We didn't think this would be the case. We thought, well, ammonia, it's going to be farms, right? But we do have, of our pipeline, we do have a lot of interest from agricultural companies wanting to decarbonize and looking at it from that angle. But the majority of our pipeline is actually energy companies who are making renewable energy. They might have solar assets, wind assets, and then they have they want either they already have offtake agreed in some cases, so they have ammonia companies who are interested or chemical companies who are interested, and then they have energy that they want to turn into hydrogen and use somewhere else. So they already have hydrogen assets deployed. And they already have electrolyzers installed. The use cases they were going to have, perhaps for fuel cells and other things, aren't there anymore. But ammonia is not going anywhere. We're reliant on it for our food. So those are the use cases we focus on. So it's easy for us as a business model. It's relatively straightforward because while we rely on our technology and we double down on that, the offtake is in most cases agreed. There's fertilizer companies on one side, and on the other side you've got renewable energy companies who are turning that renewable energy into hydrogen in some cases, and then would love to have a small scale ammonia use case that then can scale up fast to meet demand.
An offtake, for our listeners, offtake is an agreement for purchasing your product, even though before you're actually making it. Is that description?
Yeah, basically, yeah, it's an agreement to confirm that it's worth making that product. So
Okay, so this is one way to, if you're going to build a high capex, complex physical plant or product,
mm,
you need to be sure that it's worth putting hundreds of millions of dollars into building that thing. And offtake agreements are a way to have evidence that when you've spent hundreds of millions of dollars and built the thing, someone is going to buy the produce.
right, and in your language there's a kind of hint for us as well, because we personally, or Nium, I thought me personally, we personally as the company have 57 million in offtake agreements ourselves from chemical, agricultural, mining companies. And that's useful to demonstrate to some of our partners already, who we speak with on the renewable energy side, who are making the clean hydrogen and looking for a use case. We can say, look, if you don't have a local offtake agreed yourselves, we can do it and we can take it. And fortunately, ammonia has a mature infrastructure. We've been reliant on it for 100 years for our food. So we can ship ammonia around. It's very similar conditions to propane. So we know how to move ammonia around. Hydrogen doesn't have that. There is no infrastructure. There is no way to ship hydrogen at scale around the world. So that's interesting. And in the beginning, that's where we start, right? It's we're going to decarbonize fertilizer, and we're going to use this as product, a way to replace grey products with green in the ammonia world as is. But then you have the case of, all right, if you're able to then plug into global infrastructure and start moving hydrogen energy, renewable energy around as hydrogen turned into ammonia, and if that can be done effectively, then some people are interested in one day having energy from the global south shipped to the global north. And then, as I mentioned, you can burn ammonia without carbon emissions. So that's very early stage stuff, but it allows us to start thinking about what a world without fossil fuels looks like. The most traded commodity in the world today is oil, and the most energy dense carbon free molecule we have is ammonia. So there is but at the moment we focus on the agriculture, really the existing market for ammonia, and that's where we start small, scale up fast, and that's where we're at the moment. Yeah.
A final comment before I move on to my next question is, I think also we haven't made it clear enough that when we think of renewable energy, or we think of massive nuclear plants, we think of coal-fired plants, we think of these huge factories making hydrogen or ammonia. Actually, what's so exciting about what you're doing is your catalysts are like, what, the size of a car or something?
Yeah, so we're tiny, and that's a good thing in this world. So yeah, earlier in your question, you said, yeah, for offtake agreements, for example, the reason we'd be able to secure 57 million in offtakes and this kind of big pipeline of pilot projects is because of the scale of what we're doing. We're very small, and so there isn't hundreds of millions of capex for what we do. It's more like millions, right? So it allows you to have a much smaller scale entry point. If you want to build a Harbour Bosch plant, that will be $1 billion, please. Right? That's the scale. So it really is incredibly expensive to build these plants. So we operate a much, much smaller scale, and that allows for this flexibility, and it lets industry, gives them an opportunity they've never had before, which is this flexible, scalable version of ammonia production, whereas previously it was very heavy duty capex, and you happen to need a hell of a lot of fossil fuels around you if you wanted to make it work. By dropping the heat and pressure on the catalyst, we then enable for clean hydrogen to come into play, and you also don't need to power the whole process with fossil fuels as well. You need less power overall. So yeah, I thought worth clearing that bit up as well. We're very, very small. Yeah, that's the point. But we can scale up, and we're dealing with industry partners about that. Okay, what does this catalyst look like at the mega plant scale as well? Is there a way to retrofit or replace? And the answer is yeah, maybe. We don't know. We haven't gone up to that scale yet. But it's interesting to think about how we could help decarbonize in that aspect too.
Building that pipeline, talking to these industry players, can you what's been a lesson that you've learned talking to these guys? Either something that you realize now you shouldn't have done, or oh, thank God we thought to do that at the time.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is very real in company context as well as individual context. So Dunning-Kruger, for context, is I'm going to butcher it a bit, but basically it was study run by Dunning and Kruger, and they were looking at, I think, IQ and a couple of other metrics, which is people always overestimate their own ability when told what the average is. And I think that's true in companies as well, where if you listen to drink your own Kool-Aid too much, you start to kid yourselves about how good you are. So on that, and how we did that was we just went out to market and we listened more than we talked. And we started out standing in a field with a farmer in one of the biggest family-run farms in the UK. And we were talking to him about doing ammonia on his site. And then we said, okay, well, if we're going to do ammonia here, this is very early days for us. We were like, right, we're going to install a reactor here. And before we'd worked out the unit economics and everything else, we were like, right, this is how it's going to be. And then we thought, right, well, we need hydrogen then. And so I went online on LinkedIn in my naivety. This is right at the beginning of our journey. And I messaged a very big energy company who I knew was making hydrogen, and said, hello, mate, can I buy some hydrogen off you? And he's like, yeah, no, that's totally not how this works. However, why don't you come up to London? So we came back to London, and they had a very big, flashy office, and they were all wearing very nice suits. And we went in and sat down with them and had a chat, and we talked them through what we were doing. And at the end, we were like, so can we buy some hydrogen? And they were like, yeah, we'd kind of like to invest. And we were like, oh. So Phil and I, my co-founder, went for a beer afterwards, and we were like, that was weird. We went in there trying to buy hydrogen, and then we came out and they were trying to buy us. And so, the vain, arrogant way of speaking about it is because we were good, but actually it's because we were told by the market. And that led us to say, the agricultural problem is a huge one, and we have to decarbonize agriculture. But hydrogen has a real problem, a problem that they need solving yesterday, which is anyone who's deployed money in hydrogen knows this, is it's very difficult to hang on to that hydrogen. Your product is a headache. As soon as you make it, you've got this very explosive gas on site, which is very expensive to hang on to. So you need it gone. And the best way to do it is to turn it to existing market, turn to an existing market, and use that to decarbonize at the same time. So that's how we ended up with this business model. Is we pivoted, basically. We changed what we were doing and listened more and more to the market. So now we have offtake agreements with some of the big agricultural companies, but we have partnerships planned with some of the big energy companies. And that is really useful to us. It helps us in terms of we're not project developers or big engineers, but we do have engineers on our side, so we can do the smaller scale version. And then our partners in renewable energy, hydrogen companies, they can help us with the next part of scale, while we give them a kind of low barrier to entry to a very, very big market.
Okay. I'm going to switch directions.
Of course.
How we've just spoken a lot about a lot of money. But what you're not doing this for the money. I know this about you, Lewis. You're not doing this for the money.
No, you're wrong. Of course I'm doing it for money. No, I'm kidding. Obviously,
just a little tiny bit of money.
I do get paid by Nium, so let's be clear about that. And I'm not a completely deluded hippie. I do get that we don't get to capture or credit or offset or invent our way out of the climate crisis. I do understand that. I do believe I've run charities, I've done a not-for-profit, and I've worked at different type of organizations before as well. And I do believe that a venture-backed business is the best way to deal with climate because they can move very quickly. And we've demonstrated that at Nium, the ability to move very fast and to mobilize capital and people very quickly. And so when I think about Nium and what we're doing, I think more about in terms of actual emergency and a bit like war, where it's like, okay, you need to use the best resources at your disposal in order to meet a challenge. And I believe that if you look at it over the right timeframes, we as a company have a fiduciary and an ethical responsibility, but over the right timeframes, those are both met. So what I'm saying is that when capture and offsets and COP 50,000 or whatever it is this time, where we still haven't been able to achieve anything really in terms of climate, or all kind of fall by the wayside, people start looking long and hard at actually how are we going to really properly start decarbonizing. And the best way in my book to do that is to stop putting emissions in the atmosphere in the first place. And so that's where the nano catalyst comes in, and that's where our business model is designed around. We exist as a company. Our mission is to eliminate emissions. And we've started, obviously, with the most polluting chemical industrial process on our planet. So, yeah, you're right. I've exited a company a while ago, and I did okay on that one. And I have a nice life and all of that. But I also have a daughter who's just about 8 months old.
Wow.
And I want to be able to look her in the eye when I'm older and say I did my best and that our generation did our best. So, yes, that is why I'm into it. And I think that's why we have had support from governments and the BMW Foundation and so many other people as well. Like if we were just we're going to beat the competition company, I think that's slightly different. But we're like a climate company that wants to leave a better planet for future generations. And that means different things for different people. But ultimately, they can see where we're coming from and they understand the context.
How did you go about actually getting robust figures, though, robust evidence for the potential of your impact, even from the beginning? And what kind of work would you have to do now to have evidence and a credible claim for, okay, we're going to have this impact on decarbonising emissions, which I think is your main area of impact? It would be the decarbonisation part.
Yeah, good question. We look at it through a number. I mean, ultimately, right at the core of ammonia production is people look at the levelized cost, right, which is the levelized cost of ammonia. So you take your capex, your opex, and you say how cheap could you make ammonia? And because of our lower energy requirements, we can believe that we can bring that levelized cost down while still using a clean hydrogen product. So the trouble with electrifying Haber-Bosch is you can make clean ammonia, but it's very, very expensive. The levelized cost goes through the roof because of the energy requirements, right, for using clean energy to power it. So at Nium, we look at it through that lens at the core for ammonia synthesis, which is with less energy requirements and the benefits of not having to compress fossil-fueled hydrogen and other benefits that come along with that. We can get down to a low levelized cost, but we can also start hunting wherever the cheapest clean ammonia is. So wherever the cheapest clean hydrogen is, we can make the clean ammonia. So this is why we've got a project running in Spain. We've got one running in Australia as well, which is where they have a lot of abundant renewable energy. That means relatively cheap hydrogen, clean hydrogen, and then we can make cheap, clean ammonia from that. So that's one metric that we look at, the levelized cost of ammonia. And then the other one, more on the emission side, is our emissions control. And it's how we model everything we do. So emissions control is simply by deploying our technologies in different contexts at different scales, how many emissions can we eliminate? How many emissions can we stop going into the atmosphere? So for every tonne of ammonia that's made today, 2 tonnes of CO2 goes into the atmosphere. So we are down at 0.08 for ours, on our catalyst. Now, of course, we're at a much smaller scale than those massive Haber-Bosch plants. So right now, we're more costly. But over time, and with economies of scale that we'll get scaling up, we believe that we can get down to a low levelized cost while at the same time having that huge emissions impact as well. But it is a challenge. Everyone wants it cheap and everyone wants it green. And that is a tightrope that you have to walk. Fortunately, the low energy demands, the low pressure demands primarily for us mean that we are able to start demonstrating quite good economies straight out the gate, which has been useful for us.
Exactly. Just to reiterate what you've already said, it's the smaller scale, it's the decentralization, it's the lower capex to even get started. You've gone from $1 billion to a couple of million or however much it is to get started.
Right. I think we also, I just want to add this because there might be other people on Carbon 13 listening to this maybe. What we made a bit of a mistake, and this is again a bit Dunning-Kruger, it's a bit echo chamber, right? Which is like, I care deeply about climate. There's nothing that's more important to me. It's the only game in town for me, right? That's it. I'm all in on climate. But the real world, like the world of business, doesn't care that much. Like if we cared more, we would have done more by now. What they care about is money. Like what we care about as a world is money. We're a capitalist society, and that is what is the problem, but could also be the solution if we get it right with venture. But what we didn't underline for people early on when we were talking about our company, we said, yeah, like clean ammonia on demand. And we talked a lot about that. We didn't demonstrate what industry actually wants to know about it, which is more interesting, was that it's flexible, it's scalable, and it's cost effective. And those things hit home a lot more. So sometimes it's just worth taking a step back and saying, like, we all care deeply about the climate, but industry doesn't really care about that. What industry cares about is, can you do this cost effectively? Is it flexible? Does it help solve my existing headaches, like the inflexibility of Haber Bosch, like the fact that it doesn't scale down at all really, and the fact that we want to make a clean product, but we need it to be cost effective. So when we realized that that's actually what people care about a bit more, we started focusing on that, and that got us further with our partnerships. And now we have some great people on the table who understand the mission, but also want to make money while they're doing it.
Talking of people on the table, you met your co-founders on the Carbon 13 Venture Builder. What's it like going on this journey with them?
Emotional, lovely, and I think we've all grown a lot through the program and beyond, and through this company over the last 2.5 years it is now. I'm the mouth, obviously. That's why I'm on the podcast. Phil's the hands. He's like an engineer. So he's a former race car engineer. He used to work on Michael Schumacher's cars. And Dr. Yubiel New, is the brains of the operation. And he, I'm here rabbiting away about hydrogen, ammonia, and our company in general. He's actually the inventor of the technology and the reason why we're all here. It's a brilliant breakthrough, and we're very excited about it. The King made a film about us recently as well, which maybe we can put in the show notes as well. So King Charles commissioned the Sustainable Markets Initiative, and they made a documentary about what we're doing as well. So it's been a wild ride, and we really enjoyed it. I enjoy working with them, and I particularly enjoy working with two guys who our interests are very different, right? So, or our ways of approaching things, I should say, are very different. So I'm more kind of, words commercial guy. I've done startups and entrepreneur. Phil's the engineer, and UVL is a scientist. So we have each area covered, and we built the team around that triangle, which has worked very well for us. And it means that we challenge each other's assumptions and challenge each other to do better all the time as well. So that's good. And we still have a laugh while doing it, which is critical because we spend a lot of time together.
No, that is actually important. And also, I just love the imagery of the King just stood there with his iPhone filming.
Right, it was exactly like that. He was just like selfie guys, and we were in there. No, it was an incredibly good camera crew, obviously, and all the bells and whistles that came along with it. Maybe we could put it in the show notes to show people, because it's great. It's quite cool. It's great to be part of it. And that led us to suddenly being kind of people from all around the world approaching, which I think also helped with the offtakes and the other kind of commercial traction we started to get then.
Absolutely. Lewis, whenever I'm talking to you, I just think, wow, I sum you up with persistence. Where do you think your persistence has come from? Did you always have it, or has it been forged by all of those startups and charities?
Bloody relentless is maybe what my missus would say. I'm a bit obsessive. It's weird. I mean, this all came from, I was doing a not-for-profit working with kids. I set it up myself after I exited the company and did pretty well on it. And I was like, right, what am I going to do now? And I was like, I'm going to try and do good in this very kind of naive way. So then I set up this not-for-profit working with schools. It was running school trips and helping young people deal with climate change, essentially, by talking about climate, curriculum and careers in the climate change world. Never really made any money, but it did give me this kind of insight into, the climate crisis is also a bit of a mental health crisis. And this is what young people are going through, as they realize that adults have kind of sold them short on a future. And then, so I was running these skill trips to kind of show these kids these different examples of, like, look, hey, there are companies in this space. I went to shout out to Sustainable Ventures because they let me in and show all of the wonderful ventures that they were working with there, and say, look, there are people actually working on this problem. And we believe too that these are going to be the unicorns of the future. This is where you're going to generate real value over time, is companies in this space that are dealing with this problem head on. You haven't been sold short. There are people out there who care. So I did that for a while. And then one day, just before COVID hit, and I had to shut down the company along with all the schools that closed down, a kid said to me, look, mate, we don't really need you to make us feel better about climate change. You need to go out and do something about it. And I was like, oh, shit. Oh, I've sworn on the podcast, sorry. But yeah, I was like, Well, I mean, you're going to have to bleep that out. But I was like, wow, oh God, that kid is right. We talk and we bleat and we go to these conferences and we slap each other's backs and say, yeah, let's set another target. But like, nah, we need to do something. And that means hard science, hard tech. It does mean significant investment up front, but it also means huge payoffs if you can actually demonstrate real emissions reduction. So if I'm persistent, it's because that kid basically told me what my job should be when we were kind of kidding ourselves with this. Let's talk about it. We're all going to feel better. Um, and then so I'm like, right, this is a fight worth having. And then I'm like, just watching how other people have become activated and engaged. We run a project called the Planeteers, which we have wonderful people working for us. And that was just simply a call out saying, here's what we're doing. Tell us how you can help. You can tell us what you should be paid. You can tell us where you're going to work. You can tell us what your hours are going to be. But just tell us how you're going to help. And that has generated loads of applications. And we've got brilliant people who still work with us, for us to this day because of that. So, yeah, if I'm persistent, it's because it's the only game in town, and I get up earlier with more energy in my step because of that. And I know what corporate world looks like, and I know what other jobs are like. I'm old enough and ugly enough to understand all of that. But this one was like, this is definitely something that I can dedicate a significant portion of my life to, and be proud of it by the end, hopefully.
Absolutely. And that encapsulates the spirit of the kind of founder we want to work with at Carbon 13. We describe it as a doing program, not a talking program. Venture is one pillar of how we're going to solve the climate emergency. It's not the only pillar, but it's a way to actually start doing something at speed, even if it's not perfect. But it needs to done is better than perfect, right?
Sorry, I'm gonna have to challenge you, Sarah. You said not perfect, but at Nium we always go for perfect. No, that's not true. We're totally imperfect, and that makes us even better. We're learning all the time, and it is that spirit of saying, okay, this is different. We are not here to simply beat the competition. We are here for a much bigger purpose, and that means that we try to be less ego-driven, more honest with ourselves, less hierarchical, and more open to new ideas. And I think that actually we learned that a lot from Carbon 13 as well. That whatever got us here is not going to get us there. So there's new models of thinking and approaching the problems that you face as they come up at work. So that's been lovely as well, and I've enjoyed that aspect of it, where it's broadened my horizons and helped me understand that this is about far more than just rehashing an old playbook.
So if you could sum up one call to action, how would you sum it up?
Call to action for who?
Whoever is listening to this podcast.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Are you ready, guys? Are you listening? Pay attention. Slow it down to one speed.
Yeah, I think the secret with change is not on fighting the old, but building the new. I think we spend a lot of time bickering about the red team or the blue team in political circles, or whether this was the right approach or that was the right approach historically, and that means that we're kind of ego driven and start to pick teams and start pointing fingers. But I don't see that as a particularly productive way of moving forward, and I don't think we are that different actually when it boils down to it. And I think that climate is a lovely way of kind of demonstrating that, is that it doesn't really matter what lines you draw on the map. They are totally artificial and they don't exist in the real world. So yeah, so I think that it's just that this kind of vision of the future that actually can be positive, because ultimately, on the one hand, yes, the climate crisis has been caused by our relentless pursuit of growth and capitalism overall. But it also isn't really a world that's made us that happy. And so I believe that not only is there a version of a kind of more toned down, sensitive, if I use that word, capitalism in the future, but also one where we can be a bit more happy and work better as companies. And you see examples of that with the B Corp movement, with Patagonia, other companies that have actually gone that. Ben and Jerry's another example. They go that extra mile. They take more risk. They don't have these rigid infrastructure and rules, but they tend to do a lot better as well. And that for me is very interesting. It's like, okay, maybe we just evolve. Maybe we can price in externalities because we're that good. And that's the type of business that we're building at Nium, and that's something. So sorry, that was not one sentence. The one sentence is the secret with change is not on fighting the old, it's building the new. Of course, that's not mine. I stole that. But I think it's a very good line, and I think it's something that, in the context of climate, is worth thinking about.
Who did you steal it from?
It is wrongfully attributed to Socrates. It is a character from a book who is called Socrates. A former Olympian wrote the book. I can't remember his name. So it's a good one in terms of just thinking about the future rather than getting too stuck in the past.
Thank you so much, Lewis, for sharing all of that wisdom and that knowledge. I think we've had knowledge and wisdom in this podcast.
I don't know about that, but I have tried to answer your questions. So, and I just want to shout out to the Nium team, who are ridiculously good and just make me happy every day by their brilliance. So I want to say thank you to those lot, because they're excellent, all of them.
They really are. It's a great team. It's very strange when you have a public face when you work within a company, and obviously there are some faces which are more public than others, but sometimes it's the people who are working behind the scenes who are the MVPs. But anyway.
Right, I'm like the sickest, least good-looking person in the whole team as well. So it's like, God, why the monkey at the front?
No, but we need that, because you need the inventors, you need UBL, right? You desperately need that. But you also need the person who can walk into an energy office in London and somehow walk away with an investment offer.
Yes, that's true. That's true. That's helpful. And also, we don't want to distract you. Like those lot need to be in the lab. So it's better that I do this, because they don't let me near the lab most of the time. So that's good.
Thank you so much, Lewis. I want to say thank you to everybody listening. Whether you're a founder, whether you're an investor, whether you're somebody who's just curious about this space but new to the space, I hope you've got something to take away with you. You're also very welcome to reach out to Carbon 13. We're always very happy to have a chat. It's a community. It's an open door community. I think from today, we've learned that climate takes persistence. Climate takes money. Climate takes ammonia. But ultimately, climate is going to take you. Thank you for listening.